Joined now by Kyle Rowland from the Toledo Blade. And Kyle, it's almost as if we got the full off-season dad, Urban Meyer, Monday in his press conference, cracking jokes, saying, hey, I'm a halfway fun guy. There's been so much microscopic attention paid to Urban on the sidelines this season. And against Michigan State, we actually did see the more relaxed Urban, the Urban kind of throwing punches after good plays. And he talked about how he wanted the guys to have more fun, and he looked like he was having more fun on the sideline. And we even saw Shelly Meyer chime in and saying, the old Herbs is back.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's cognizant of kind of the outside chatter, people talking about the Surrender Cobra look on the sideline, the constant stress. And I think he's trying to outwardly show that, that's not the guy that he is. He got a lot of media laughs today at the press conference. And I think that the Michigan State game, just beating that team, he always wants to beat Michigan State. He and Mark D'Antonio have a little bit of a rivalry together. I think that was big. He talked about how the locker room was great afterwards. And I do believe that, but I think a little bit of that was he wanted to kind of drum up confidence amongst his team. Because as he said after the game Saturday and as he said today, that there's still plenty of work to be done for Ohio State.
It's interesting because I'm not sure if Urban ever says Michigan State. He doesn't say that team up North State, but he always just kind of says we've got a lot of respect for that program. We've got a lot of respect for that coach. And obviously there's been a lot of talk over the last 6-7 years about who's Ohio State's number 2 rival, because Michigan's always the number 1. Penn State would like to think they are. But you look at what Urban Meyer in the Michigan State series has been, and all of those games have been a lot more impactful almost every year than what Ohio State-Penn State has been. You go back to 2012, that was the game that a lot of the Ohio State players finally started to buy into Urban Meyer. That was the Braxton Miller show me your heart game when he hit Devin Smith down the sideline, a 7-point win. The following season, Michigan State wins in the Big Ten championship game. 2014 was probably J.T. Barrett's best offensive game that season. 2015, Michigan State wins, and that derailed the most talented Ohio State team under Urban Meyer from getting back to the college football playoff. 2016, a narrow victory in East Lansing, which maybe was a harbinger that Ohio State wasn't quite as good as they thought they were. Last year, the blowout win at home against Michigan State, which propelled Ohio State towards the win over Michigan and the win in the Cotton Bowl and also a Big Ten championship. And then now we've got this game where Ohio State showed some things in beating Michigan State by 20. Certainly that's a type of game that maybe could mean a more confident Ohio State team going these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're more confident. I don't necessarily think they're better. Michigan State's offense isn't great. I thought it was questionable decisions by Mark D'Antonio with the quarterbacks. I think Rocky Lombardi should have played the entire game, start to finish. That said, confidence is a huge thing in all of sports. The offense did some things late in the game that could carry over to Maryland and then on to Michigan. And defensively, I mean, they completely shut down Michigan State. I mean, that certainly was a huge boost for a defense that's been beleaguered basically the entire season.
They did it without Baron Browning, linebacker, missed the game with an injury. Is probable for the game against Maryland. Certainly coming off of the win over Nebraska, the talk was Ohio State was able to run the ball, but it was against Nebraska. Well, now Ohio State was able to stop the ball, but it was against Michigan State. I will say this, though, no pass interference penalties on the Ohio State secondary. I'm not sure if there's been a game this year we could say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall the defense has to be thrilled with things going forward. And they got another opportunity this week against Maryland. Not a bad team, and I think this will be Maryland's Super Bowl. This is kind of everything. They've been through an unbelievable year. Everyone is well aware of everything that's gone on. I think this is going to be their biggest game of the season. They can kind of cap it off. They can get bowl eligible. So I think they're going to be walking into a hornet's nest maybe a little bit. I don't think they can take this team lightly at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if, third, fourth quarter, it's close. And I know Ohio State fans probably want a blowout Saturday going into the Michigan game. I think it might serve them well, honestly, to have kind of a close game.
We talked about how Mike Weber ran the ball well, particularly in the fourth quarter against Michigan State. Now, a Michigan native, he seemingly saves his best games against the schools from Michigan. Dwayne Haskins, not necessarily a Maryland native. He was born in New Jersey, grew up in New Jersey, but did go to high school in Maryland. So he's going back to Maryland this week for the game. And most likely in the first half, he's going to surpass Joe Germain and have Ohio State's single-season passing record.
Yeah, I mean, it was originally a Maryland commit. So I'm sure it's a big game for him, basically a home game. Just as far as where he is right now in this season, it's a huge game. He had his fewest amount of completions against Nebraska. He had his fewest passing yards against Michigan State. It's not like it's a 5-alarm fire or anything, but clearly he's not playing up to the level that he was.
Has he regressed from where he was beginning of the season, or is that defenses catching up now that there is 10 games of film tape on him?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, and it's a little bit of he played so well early this season that it just seems like, oh, he only completed 63% of his passes instead of like 81. But still, going into the Michigan game, the weather, I think, has been an impact too. It's colder now. But this is a big game for him. The Tate Martell rumblings are out there. It's pretty clear now that Tate Martell is going to play against Maryland, and I think he's going to be an X factor against Michigan.
We saw that a little bit against Michigan State. Certainly when he came in that first time, I think it was first and goal from the 6, immediately picked up 5 yards, and that was almost a bread and butter play that we saw from Ohio State previous to this season. A little bit of an up and down performance from Tate. You'd like to see him jump on that fumble a little bit earlier and avoid the turnover in the fourth quarter, but you're absolutely right. We've heard all season we're trying to find get Tate in the game. They found a way. Do you make much out of Dwayne Haskins' comments after the game that he was a little frustrated by Tate? It didn't seem like there was any animosity between Haskins and Tate Martell, but you could tell, he's a competitor, and that's what Urban Meyer wants. He wants competitors, that he wasn't necessarily happy that he got pulled out of that game.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything bad, and I don't think there's any bad blood between those guys or anything. I mean, as you say, he's a competitor. He's a starting quarterback. He wants to be on the field at all times. And it's tough, too, because Martell mostly goes in on the red zone, which is that's where you really want to be on the field if you're a quarterback. You want to be out there when your team scores. You want to throw touchdown passes. I just think it's a necessary thing for Ohio State. Martell's a good wrinkle. He's a dynamic guy who can throw, too. That's the thing. Like, if he's out there, it doesn't mean he's going to run or it's going to necessarily be a run play for Ohio State.
As much as you'd like to see Dwayne Haskins run the ball, you almost want to see Tate Martell throw the ball just to keep the defenses honest, regardless of who that quarterback is.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing, I know I'm kind of fast-forwarding over the Maryland game now, but it's just going to be so interesting to see how much he plays against Michigan. Ohio State's going to go into that game as the underdog more than likely, which Urban Meyer is going to play that up all week long. But they're going to have a bag of tricks because not only are they the underdog, by Vegas, but they actually probably aren't the better team. And I think Urban Meyer will relish that and have some plays saved up that people will be like, whoa, that was a heck of a call.
There's no doubt about it. The Don Brown defense they're going to face in 2 weeks is going to be the best defense they have seen all season long. And what we saw against Michigan State is when Haskins was in the ball game, those DNs would crash in because there was no fear that Haskins was going to keep the ball. You can't do that against Tate Martell. One of the interesting plays that ended up not happening in that Michigan State game was when Haskins did keep the ball. Now, he ended up stepping out of bounds, but he tucked his shoulder down and tried to run through a guy, picked up a couple more yards. The play didn't exist because of a penalty behind it, but I think that might have been Haskins' kind of rebuttal from 2 weeks before when he took the dive.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's times where he makes a concerted effort to run the ball and kind of say, hey, I can do this too. I can be effective. I can add a little something else to the offense. But he's obviously a passer, and I don't think they want to get him. Or as good as Tate Martell is, he does need to kind of duck out of bounds and avoid the contact.
We've kind of touched on it. Maryland is the opponent this week. Ohio State claims they're not going to look past Maryland for Michigan, and certainly there is a lot of talent on this Maryland team, and it's been a difficult season for Maryland, to put it bluntly, when you have to go through a player dying in the offseason, coach put on leave, brought back for 24 hours, and then fired. It has been an up and down the last couple of weeks for Maryland. They're coming off a loss to Indiana. So this Terrapin team, I don't know if we know exactly what we're going to get out of Maryland, except we know there's going to be some talent on that field.
Yeah, and this is a game you and I talked about earlier this year as kind of a trap game. We said Purdue and Maryland. Well, here we are. After a big-time Michigan State win, Body's a little banged up in that physical game on Saturday. You got Michigan the next week. It's on the road. The recipe is kind of there for this to be close and get a little squirrely on Ohio State. I expect them to win. I expect them to win by double digits. I think it will be a semi-tough game. In the third and fourth quarter, it'll probably be close.
Are there any style opponents Ohio State can realistically get at this point? Because I don't think if Ohio State beats Michigan, I'm not sure that's even going to be enough to get Ohio State into the Final Four, because all they're going to say is Purdue. It's the same argument they made last year with Iowa, and I think it's a hard argument to overcome.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you absolutely blew out Michigan, I don't think it necessarily cancels out Purdue. I mean, it was just such a bad margin. I mean, if they just would have kept it to, 35-20, I mean, that's just such a big difference. And Purdue hasn't helped them either these last few weeks, losing some games and getting blown out by Minnesota. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough. I think the Big 12 is kind of the key.
Right.
If Oklahoma or West Virginia win that league with one loss, I just don't think Ohio State's going to jump over them, even if they beat a Michigan team that's ranked, third or fourth.
And the other factor, obviously, with all of this is you're not necessarily going to get a big bump coming out of the Big Ten championship game. Northwestern's already secured the West title. That's not going to mean a whole lot, even if you blow out Northwestern, which could be an issue for Michigan as well. If we get a little bit of chaos and maybe Georgia upsets Alabama, if Michigan's going to be able to get in over a Notre Dame team that already beat Michigan, if they're going to put both Georgia and Alabama in, that's why the next couple of weeks are going to be fun. That's why we love college football. Kyle Rowland from The Blade, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.